Good evening, NABJ. I'm Melanie Eversley, Chair of the Elections Committee. Welcome to the first forum of a unique campaign season. This year, we're going to experience the first all virtual NABJ election. Now, our committee wants to make sure that in spite of this, members have access to the candidates. So I'm going to announce some important dates. Thursday, May 21st, forum with the candidates for academic representative. Thursday, May 28th, forum with unopposed candidates for parliamentarian and Region 4 director. June 11th, a second forum with treasurer candidates. June 25th, a second forum with candidates for academic representative. By July 6th, you must have your NABJ membership in place in order to be eligible to vote. July 13th through August 7th will be electronic voting. And finally, winners will be announced the evening of August 7th. With that, I'd like to introduce our moderator for the evening. Jordyn Holman is a business reporter at Bloomberg News, where she covers retail, fashion, and shopping. She also has written about race, class, and gender in corporate America. Take it away, Jordyn.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Melanie. So I'm excited to moderate this event tonight, which is the first of a series of campaign forums meant to allow candidates for the NABJ Board of Directors to address members and share their qualifications. Like Melanie said, my name is Jordyn Holman. I'm a reporter at Bloomberg. And I also want to lay the ground rules for tonight's debate. So both candidates will get a 2-minute opening statement, 1 minute for responses, and then 30 seconds for rebuttal if they request it. There will be a 2-minute closing statement, and we're going to stick closely to the time since we have a limited amount of time together. So another thing, of course, we want to keep the conversation civil and focus on the qualifications of the candidates so everyone gets a better idea. And for the audience out there, you guys will have time to ask questions. So just throw your questions in the Zoom Q&A and we'll start grabbing them and asking them as well. So you can do that at any point. So now let me introduce the candidates. We'll start with Ernest. So Ernest Owens is an award-winning journalist and CEO of Ernest Media Empire. His work has been featured by the New York Times, CNN, NPR, NBC News, BET, and many more. Ernest co-chaired both the NABJ LGBT Task Force and Black Male Media Project. He holds degrees from UPenn and USC. Then we have Walter Smith-Randolph, who is a reporter and special projects contributor for WKRC Local News 12 in Cincinnati. He is co-chair of the Young Journalist Task Force and the Millennial Media Summit. He has reported for WWMT and WEYI. You have a lot of letters, so I hope I got those right. And then Walter is also a native New Yorker. He's taught at Western Michigan University and holds degrees from Villanova and CUNY. Great, so I'm gonna throw out the first question to both of you all. So if elected as treasurer, how would you work with the NABJ Board of Directors? And what type of relationship would you wanna foster with the local chapters? And Walter, you can start.
Okay. As treasurer, I would like to be a person that is holding the board accountable and is also being transparent with our members. I believe that you should have some oversight and you should be able to make decisions, fiscal decisions that are based off the facts and based off the numbers and take the emotion out of it. As far as the local chapters, I believe that you can serve as an advisory level, that the local chapters have their own treasurer and you don't want to get too much the national treasurer involved in the local chapter, a little bit too much, but you can, kind of be the person that's serving as an advisor, serving as some counsel, giving the local chapters, some ideas and telling them, this may be a way that you need to fundraise. Have you thought about this strategy? Have you thought about that strategy? And I have some experience doing that. I've been working with NABJ several different capacities for the past 10 years. I served as vice president of the Greater Cincinnati chapter, and also at the national level, I've had several roles too. So, and I have some experience as an investigative reporter. That's my background. So, I'm really into transparency and accountability, and I believe that that's something that we have to do on our board and also to our members as well.
Greetings, NABJ. My name is Ernest Owens, and I'm running for treasurer because of the fact that I believe that NABJ really need to think about how to plan for COVID-19. One of the most important things of my campaign has been talking about transparency, but not on the sense of just talking about it internally, but how do we look nationally? What we're doing to make sure that we make sure our reserves are in the right place, making sure that we are reprioritizing how we spend money. What has happened with the National Convention is unfortunate, and it is 2/3 of our current budget. One of the things I would actively be working on is looking at the previous treasurers and asking for their input, but coming up with a crisis strategy to make sure that we do not become financially dependent on certain events. This is something that's very important to me as I look at my own organization as the vice president for the Philadelphia Association of Black Journalists. I raised $100,000, helped raise $100,000 on my board in 1 year, reprioritizing how we scaled back from big events, but looked at various ways to build economic diversity in our portfolios. And that's what I want to do with NABJ, scaling back from a lot of these big events, these big ticketed events that oftentimes put us in a financial whirlwind, especially right now. That is some of the ideas that I want to do, in addition to really being transparent through not only the partnerships that we get, but also working with members to understand what the value is for them and their memberships at all levels. I believe that all members in an organization matter, and I want them to understand why their investment in NABJ is worthwhile, especially during these times.
And I want to apologize to both of you guys for not letting you do your opening statements. So please do that. I know you guys kind of touched on it, but Walter, please do your opening statement. You have 2 minutes.
Okay, everyone, again, Walter Smith-Randolph here, reporter, special projects contributor at WKRC, Local 12 News in Cincinnati. I've been an NABJ member for 10 years. I'm originally from New York City. I have a bachelor's degree from Villanova University, master's degree from the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism. I currently serve as co-chair of the Young Journalist Task Force, as well as co-chair of the Millennial Media Summit. I'm also co-chair of the programming for a national convention, which will be virtual this year, and I'm vice president of the Greater Cincinnati chapter. So as you know, I have a lot of experience with this organization, and so I've been looking for new ways to take my leadership to the next level, and I thought that treasurer would be the best fit. I'm a numbers person. Again, I have an investigative reporter background, so I'm always looking at spreadsheets, I'm looking at data, I'm looking at numbers. I'm used to holding officials accountable, being transparent, following the money, and so that's why I believe that this is a good fit for me. I want to, again, make sure that we are being transparent and accountable. I want to make sure that we're diversifying our revenue streams. 2/3 of our budget does come from our national convention. So we need to come up with new ways of getting revenue. We need to have some smaller events that are regionally based, that are going on with our chapters. I have some experience doing that with the Millennial Media Summit that we have in New York City. A lot of times for people, that is their first taste of an ABJ. They can't afford the big conference, so they go to the little one and then they work their way up. I believe that we also need to monetize our webinars. We've been having some great webinars with NABJ for the past couple of weeks through COVID-19. We need to continue to do that. We need to make sure that we have some sponsorships and that we are doing that. We also need to make sure that we are using our digital real estate. We have a great website, we have a monthly newsletter, so we need to see if we can get some sponsors and some advertising for that. Looking at a 2017 annual report, we only had $4,000 in advertising revenue. You look at O&A, they had $44,000 in the same year. What is O&A doing that we're not doing to make sure that we are making the best advantage of our digital real estate? We also need to create financial and fundraising trainings for our local chapters, because I've been in local chapters, and sometimes we get scared of numbers, but we need to empower our members to fundraise for our organization on the local level and then bring it to the national level.
Hi, my name is Ernest Owens again, and I'm running for treasurer because of the fact that I believe that my relevant experience is necessary for what NABJ needs right now. I'm running for this position because this is a position I have the relevant experience for. I'm not being touted or appointed. I'm running because I care about the organization and its financial stability. I come with relevant experience where I have brought profitable events for my chapter at the Philadelphia Association of Black Journalists. I have done such and receptions in my task force chair as the LGBT task force chair, the Media Institute, and a lot of the events that I've worked on within NABJ was about raising money and bringing profitable solutions. It's easy to make a bunch of events and conferences and summits, but what's very important is making sure they're profitable and making sure that they make sense. A lot of the work that I've done within PABJ is redirecting our work. So when it was talked about that 2/3 of the NABJ budget is into this big convention, I have worked actively within my own chapter to get our organization not to do that. So when I talk about the priorities that I care about within the organization, I'm talking about it from actual experience. My organization raised over $100,000 last year and counting. Last week, we held a Giving Tuesday fundraiser where we raised $2,000 on Facebook. And these are the type of ideas and real experience-based types of experiments that I've done within my chapter that I believe that we can not only just teach NABJ chapters to do, but also implement. I also care about ethics and about transparency, looking at what type of partnerships that NABJ get into, because it's so quick to talk about getting the money, but where the money comes from and where does this money go is a very important conversation to have. My chapter has had those tough decisions. We didn't accept every check that was given our way. We also understand that the organization should monetize digital opportunities, but we should be very mindful about what type of partnerships that look like. As someone who knows how to raise money and develop, the NABJ events that I've done were self-sustained and profitable. I think that we can come up with events out of the pocket, but we can't treat this like it's a slush fund. And so with this type of financial experience as a business owner, I'm the CEO of Ernest Empire LLC. I'm self-made. I made that money starting my business. I support freelancers in the free economy. We started an entrepreneurial task force.
Sorry, time's up.
Oh, great, thank you.
Thank you both. So you guys both touched on the coronavirus pandemic, which obviously has changed everyone's lives and this organization. So do you have a proposal for how NABJ will be helped in the short and long term, given the pandemic's impact on the organization and its members? And we can start with you, Ernest.
Great. First of all, we need to look at the impact. We need to start measuring the impact and being honest about what's going to happen. Jobs will have to be lost. Furloughs will have to happen. That's just the bottom line. If our organization is to maintain a level of profitability and maintain its financial reserves and upkeep them, then we're going to have to look at our budget and see how we can scale back. That's just the truth. There's no way that everyone's going to be able to win at the same time. So those are some of the first things that we're going to have to look at. I will also talk to other previous treasurers because NABJ's financial history has always been a bell curve. Things go up, things go down, and we're looking at a downward spiral because of coronavirus. And so we need to really look at how we can stay even, especially during these times. In addition to that, we need to start really talking about making our chapters financially independent, teaching them how they can self-sustain, teaching them what it looks like to get grants in their own region. I think too often chapters feel like they have to compete with the national organization to get grants. And I really don't believe that's the case, because in Philadelphia, we was able to independently raise money in our own city without having to compete with the major media companies that NABJ often do. I think those are conversations that we need to start having right now. We don't have to wait for me to be elected treasurer.
Walter?
Okay, I think in the short term that we need to continue doing what we're doing. I do like the COVID-19 relief fund that NABJ started last week. I donated to that. I think we also need to be looking at what our local chapters are doing. Here in Cincinnati on Friday, we had a DJ that was on Facebook Live, and for 2 hours we just played music and we asked people to donate money via Cash App, and we were able to raise $1,000 in just 2 hours. I know that doesn't sound like a lot of money, but $100 for 9 different journalists, that goes a long way. That's somebody's groceries for the week. That's what we need to continue to do in the short term. We need to monetize these webinars that we're having. We need to go after the partners and the sponsors that we've had all along and continue using those folks. But we also need to look outside of the usual sponsors that we have. We need to have to go after those grants. I was just seeing that, Google is offering grants for advertising. That way we can get a grant to put out the NABJ name. So I think that's what we need to do in the short term. In the long term, I think that we need to continue going in the direction that we're going, but we do need to diversify the revenue stream so that way we're not just depending on the national convention for all of our budget.
Thank you. So this is important note for everyone listening is that NABJ has had a surplus for the past 4 years. So if elected treasurer, how would you all propose that this continues, especially given the economic situation that the entire country is in? And Walter, let's start with you.
We need to continue to save, and we need to continue to invest. Just because we've had a surplus for 4 years does not mean that we should be spending money all willy-nilly. So we need to make sure that we are reinvesting that into our organization. Now might be a good time to talk to our investment portfolio, the person who's overseeing that, and say, where can we invest some money? The stock market isn't where it was pre-pandemic, so we need to make sure that we are reinvesting in that. We need to continue on the path that we have been, continuing, making sure that we are making smart moves with our money. Even when I'm looking at the Millennial Media Summit, which I've run for the past few years, we've had to make some cuts here and there. It's simple as like, we used to give breakfast and lunch. Now we just give lunch. I know that seems small, but when you start making those little cuts, they add up to something that's very big. So we need to continue making the smart moves that we've been making, and we need to continue reinvesting in ourselves. And again, having, smaller events, those smaller events that we can have around the country, like the Millennial Media Summit, like our regional conferences, can really help us make sure that we're headed in the right direction.
I agree with some of that. I think one of the most important things that we really have to think about is how do we invest in our organizations that put on programming. I think that there's only a handful of task forces and groups that get to put on big scale events like the Millennial Media Summit, but they often don't make as much money as it takes. I know that this year, the Millennial Media Summit did not actually make a really strong profit compared to its earlier years. And I think that one of the things that we have to think about is that while we're putting on these big events, are they yielding profit? Should something change, whether it's the way it's being organized, whether it's the amount of money we invest up front, or is it maybe just the way in which we have continued to do such programming? I think we need to be very strategic about moving forward, which events that we invest in and how we support them. One of the solutions that I do believe in is that we're asking so much of our members and our task forces, which oftentimes are volunteered. They don't get paid positions unless you're working the convention. But if you're working on task forces, you don't get paid to do that work. We should really give them some money to play with to be able to think about profitable ways. The LGBT task force, we were able to get money from broadcast companies to fund our actual receptions. We didn't actually get any money from them to do that. So that's some of the most important investments that I would propose.
I want to make sure that you guys both get a chance to touch on the fact of how the surplus should be distributed in your perspective. You talked a lot about making sure that it continues, but in your perspective, if we do continue to have a surplus, how should that revenue be distributed amongst the organization? And Walter.
Again, I do think if we continue to have a surplus, we need to reinvest in ourselves and make sure that we're spending the money in the right places. But I also do think that we need to come up with a way that, some of our local chapters and our task force can also lean on the organization. I don't want to say that we are just going to give money to our chapters and task forces. We have a lot of them. However, if we have some, struggling chapters or struggling task forces, or a task force that maybe wants to start a project and needs, some seed money, they should be able to lean on the national organization to do that. So again, I think just, reinvesting in ourselves, and also just coming up with new ways that we can help, our struggling members, our struggling chapters, and our struggling task forces.
Okay.
Well, one thing that I think is very important to note is that the surplus is not a slush fund. It's not something that is pretty much what we decide to spend on how. It should be used to reinvest in the infrastructure that keeps the organization afloat. So that looks like investing in, our technology. I think our website needs to get a real updo. I think that there are certain crucial and essential staff that we need to stay in place. I think that we also need to think carefully about the ways in which we, solicit people for partnerships and what those incentives look like. But I also think it's important to think about ways in which we have a better fund set aside for task forces to be able to use for programming that shows profitability. Not every single task force like the Young Journalist Task Force, where they get a Millennial Summit every year. But I think that if we're going to invest that type of money in, we do need to see a yield. In Philadelphia, I've invested in helping support a cannabis conference that has made 4 times the amount of money that we invested in it. And I think that we need to think about solutions that aren't just about just spending money, but we also need to think about how that money can be spread around to different groups that hasn't been able to take the opportunity to do so.
Thank you. And thank you all for continuing to submit questions in the Q&A chat. I'm going to grab a question right now from there. One question really touches on the heart of what the organization is, membership. So what ideas do you have to entice and encourage membership in the near future? And Ernest, let's start with you.
For starters, we currently have a chapters grant program that gives $500. And I think that we should increase that. So when we talk about surplus, we need to increase some of the programs that we have. From what I've heard from some people on the board, $150, I believe, is going out to people for the COVID relief. In my chapter, we just got $10,000 grant a couple of days ago, and we're looking at giving, a larger sum of money to help out members. So I think that we need to really bulk up our chapter grant funding, absolutely. I mean, we have to remember that the membership in these chapters is the backbone of NABJ. Without the chapters, we don't have a National Association of Black Journalists. So I think that we really need to step up with our investment into those types of funds that give out that support, not just only for students, but also for mid-level professionals and some of our retirees and seasonal professionals that have served in this organization, done a lot of work. We need to really put our money where our mouth is when it comes to investing in the grants that we currently have for our members.
Thank you, Walter.
So I think that we need to, reward participation. If people are involved in NABJ, they need to, be rewarded to be getting more involved in NABJ. I think we also need to give people a reason to join our chapters and to come to our national convention. Something that we do here in Cincinnati is that we have our meeting at a different location every single month, and our members know ahead of time. And sometimes members just join and they want to come because they want to see the inside of a TV station. And for us, that may be normal, but for some people, that's not normal. I think that we need to be doing more job fairs, especially regional job fairs. We have a lot of members all across the country. So if you're having, Region 2 conference like we did last year, make sure that you're having a job fair with some regional outlets and organizations, so that way people can come and submit applications and just do interviews on the spot. We need to do more networking events. I think that these smaller events will lead people to say, okay, well, I see what you're doing at the local level. This is great what you're doing in Cincinnati. Let me go to Washington, D.C. to see what the National Convention is all about.
Great. And this is another audience question. And speaking of the National Convention, what would be away from the current financial model that is so reliant on an in-person national convention? Ernest, let's start with you.
Well, for starters, I think what we need to really talk about is these regionals for one. I think that the financial model currently with the regionals really disproportionately gives money to NABJ in a way that doesn't necessarily want hosting cities or chapters to participate. As a person who served on the board and has had a regional in my city, when I look at the financial disproportion of how much money chapters are able to get for helping to host and how much NABJ gets, it's not very desirable and it's not very equitable. And I think that we need to start thinking about ways to look at regional events first and how to make those a better yield and a better engagement for chapters that are participating, for the members that are involved, and then also thinking about not using the organization as the convention as the ultimate destination. In Philadelphia, our gala used to be our biggest event, but we realized very quickly that the gala doesn't make as much money as we would love it to do to be able to support everything that we want to do. So if NABJ really wants to diversify its revenue, they need to look at the programs they currently have and reevaluate its profitability. I think regionals is a good way to start. I think there's more that can be done for them. And I think that we need to also think about the chapters who are putting in that labor and that work to do that.
Jordyn, can you repeat the question? Because you kind of cut out when you asked it.
Yes, so speaking about the National Convention, how you left off, what will you do to help NABJ move away from the current financial model that's very dependent on the in-person national convention?
Again, I do think that we need to do, more of the smaller events, like I mentioned earlier, like the Millennial Media Summit. We have very niche members that are members of our organization. So we need to be going after those members to make sure that we're putting on programming for them, like the summit, like I've mentioned before, like the NABJ Basics Bootcamp that happens in Region 3. I do think that our regional conventions can be better and can be more dynamic. I also do think that we need to have some type of virtual, everyone is Zooming right now, so we need to bring Zoom or some type of virtual to our national convention. Not everyone can afford the $300 or something to go to national conventions. So what if we are able to say, okay, you can pay $25 to go to this session that's going to be on this time, this date, and have it virtual. That way we can get more members who are, tuning into what is happening at our conventions and at our different programming. We have all this technology, we need to use it.
Thank you. And let's just go back to talking about membership and how that impacts NABJ. So should NABJ consider a major revision of its fiscal policy? So right now, member dues are less than 5% of the annual budget. Should that be reconsidered and restructured? And if so, how? And let's start with you, Ernest.
Absolutely. I think that currently we need to reevaluate our current dues. I do think that, one, if we're going to raise the rate or the cost, which I do think might be necessary right now, we also need to really provide clarity on all these different price distinctions. I'm a premium member, and it's hard for me to understand what's the difference between being a premium member and a professional member. And so I think that there needs to be some clarity more on the benefits up front to members outside of just convention rate discounts, because I think that there's more that should be talked about. Furthermore, we need to look at our costs and our systems in place. I mean, the way that we have had conventions and how much staff we've had and how many people, get, stipends, and some of those people who get stipends can also run for the board at the same time. I think we need to really look at a lot of the financial relationships that we have and with partners and how we deviate funds that way, because a lot of expenses, when you're looking at travel, hotel, and all these types of registrations and incentives that we do have, I think a lot of the chunk of money that we spend for those types of additives, I think do jack up the prices. So I would really look at how much money are we giving out and how much money incentives are we providing.
I do think that we need to raise the rates on people who can afford it. We have to remember that we are all journalists. We all do not make a lot of money. So we can't just raise the rates on everybody. We can raise the rates on people who can afford it, and we need to let people know where that raise is going to. So say, for example, if you've been a member for more than 10 years or been in the business for more than 10 years, and we raise it $50, that $50 maybe should go to help a struggling journalist or maybe a young journalist who can't get to convention. I don't think that we should just do it across the board, because not everyone can afford it. When I started in this business, I was reporting on Elmira, New York, and I made $20,000 a year. So raising the rates across the board, I don't think would be something that I would want to do. But for those that can afford it, then we should go to them and ask for that.
Great, thank you. The audience is very curious about talking about task force, which you guys both have touched on. So I'm going to grab a few questions off of that. So can both of you all expand on how, if elected, you would help some of the newer task force of the organization that don't have as much money as the older ones? One complaint that people hear amongst the task force is that they don't feel like they all get enough financial support from NABJ. So Walter, let us start with you.
Okay, I've been co-chair of the Young Journalists Task Force for a few years now, and that has been one of my major complaints, and I've been saying that the national organization needs to give us money. But as I get more involved in the organization, I don't necessarily think that's a good idea. I do, like I said earlier, think that we should develop some type of system where you can lean on the national organization. So if you need some seed money, you can start that. But this is why also my platform that I said that we need to come up with some type of financial empowerment, training, tools, and strategies for our task force members and for our chapter members. That should be something that is mandatory to be a part of this organization, because we need to empower our members to go out there and look for the money. I think journalists sometimes say we're scared of money. Oh, we don't like numbers. That's why we got into journalism. But we know where the money is. We know how to follow the money. We know who the movers and shakers are in our community. So if we are training our task force leaders and training our chapter members and saying, okay, this is what you need to do. Maybe you should think about going and asking the energy company in your city. That's a good idea, but also saying that we're here for you if you need to lean on us.
Ernest?
I
think it's easier said than done. As someone who was in an LGBT task force, you're just never going to make the kind of money that a sports journalism task force would get. I think what we need to be intentional about is recognizing that certain task forces are necessary for different reasons, and that everything is not necessarily based off of a financial system that is profitable by default. I think that when we look at, if the Young Journalists Task Force wasn't able to yield a crazy amount of profit over the past couple of years, even with some incentives from NABJ, like a financial investment to have a summit, What does that mean for a journalist like the freelancers task force? What does that mean for some of these other task forces that just been created? I think if I was on the board, we should have a real conversation about how many task forces we keep expanding. It's like having children. If you can't raise them and take care of them, you might want to reconsider having all of them. So every year we see all these new task forces come, but we also don't see any new money or new motives for the ones we currently have. So I think for me, it's about checks and balances and really taking a real look at who's serving and what they need and seeing what needs to be done, because every task force has its own unique needs. And I don't think there should be a unilateral approach for all of them. I think it can be condescending to tell every task force you need financial literacy training. Some of them need the money, they just need the access.
Great. In following up on the idea of task force and the expansion of them, what are your thoughts on consolidating struggling task force? Ernest, let's start with you.
I'm a business owner. And as someone who was on the LGBT task force as the co-chair for 2 years, I came into a task force that was like literally defunct. And we had to, myself and Travell and so many other great people, we had to pull it up by the bootstraps. And what that looked like was looking at our own networks and looking at sponsorships that we can create, finding ways to look within our organization and even cross-sector, cross-collaborate, look at people from other groups that may not be a member, but get that kind of feedback. I would have liked to see, and I want to see more of, the organization playing a pivotal role in telling people what that looks like. When you get into these task forces, you inherit them, and it's like, create webinars, create programming, and put them on YouTube, great. But we don't see exactly a blueprint or a standard, an expectation. And we have to create that. But then there's conversations of money. So I really think that it's up to the board and it's up to senior leadership in the organization to really think about critically how each of these task forces should be ran, giving them the autonomy, but also, being honest to them and letting them have some flexibility. But there needs to be a fund set aside like we do for grants and things.
Thank you. Walter?
I do think that we do need to combine some of these task forces. We do have a lot of task forces, but I also think that we need to prioritize some because the task forces serve different functions. So, you have the Young Journalists Task Force that's really going after our younger members to get them involved in NABJ, to hear them out and to make sure that we have programming designed for them because they are our future. But at the same time, we have a task force like, the Greek Life Task Force. We have to look at and understand that some of these task forces, they serve different purposes. And so sometimes we're going to have to prioritize, task force and where the money is going over some of the other ones. So yes, I do think that some of them should be merged.
Great, thank you. And let's go on. There's a few questions about sponsorship here. So what I pose to both of you all is, how should the organization approach sponsorship, and how should it evaluate who we're aligning ourselves when it comes to events? Walter, let's start with you.
I do believe that we need to come up with some type of rubric or litmus test and make sure that we are partnering with sponsors that are in line with our mission. I think, what happened this week of us pulling out of, that webinar is unfortunate. That should never happen again. But I've had experience with that before where, even running the Young Journalists Task Force, when I was approached and said, hey, X, Y, and Z wants to sponsor this event. And I've had to push back and said, hey, I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think our members are going to like it. So I do think that we need to come up with some type of rubric or litmus test to make sure that we are aligning with the right people. I also think we need to diversify. We go after the same companies every year. You go into, to the convention floor and you see CNN, you see CBS, but maybe we need to be looking at some organizations that are like non-traditional journalism, maybe something that's a little bit more social activists that are more aligned with the NABJ mission and our model.
Thank you. Ernest?
Well, I just want to be clear. I think our sponsors, CNN and groups, I appreciate their contributions. Some of our members wouldn't be able to get to where they are without some of those sponsorships. I think the problem isn't that we should compare. Let's be clear. Huawei was affiliated to the Chinese Communist Party. They're an international global tech giant that is currently facing indictments for racketeering and other things. I think a vetting process is what we need to have in our organization. I think just simply trying to say, well, we should use the same old sponsors. Look, if the same sponsors giving us money, great. But I think we also need to look at some of these new ones and what their intentions are and see if they align with our values. But I think it requires vetting. I think what happened this week was a terrible lapse in judgment. I think that when you have an organization this big with this much staff, that this should have been vetted better. And I think that we have to think about how one bad sponsorship collaboration can impact others, because other groups are looking at us to set the standard, and an organization as big as us, we cannot continue to make those type of fumbles. So I would say that I would impose a better vetting process, and that there should be multiple people having that conversation. I wonder how many people saw Huawei on the flyer within the staff of NABJ and the board before that got approved. Because if I would have saw it, I mean, I'm reading the news.
Thank you. Thank you. And this is another popular question that we're getting from the audience. People are grateful that both of you all are running, but would love to hear a little bit more specifics about your experience directly dealing with a budget of the size that NABJ would be if you're elected. So can you speak a little bit more to any experiences, tough decisions you've had to make when it comes to balancing budgets, or just dealing with a large quantity of money? So Ernest, let us begin with you.
Wonderful. So I previously served as the secretary for the Philadelphia Access Media, which is PhillyCam. Our budget is close to $5 million. I've been on that board for 4 years, and we've had to make decisions around COVID, around jobs and around fellowships and programming, where we had to reprioritize our financial structure, which was doing trainings and things of that sort, and what that looked like. I learned how to raise money from PhillyCam. I took that experience to the Board of Philadelphia Association of Black Journalists, where we raised the most money last year in our entire history. And we're the founding chapter in NABJ, by the way. So we raised over 6 figures. And I learned how to really get some big grants from organizations like LinFest and Philadelphia Independence Philadelphia Media and other groups. So my experience in that alone, I'm also, again, a business owner, a media business owner, a freelancer. So I've learned how to hustle over the years to get to where I'm going. And I think that's the kind of spirit and type of diversity of fundraising and development that I want to bring to this position as treasurer. All of my experience in this type of way doesn't just come from the NABJ network. I'm not an NABJ baby, but I am an NABJ lover. And I think that those are the type of appeals and approaching that passion and outside talent that I actually have that I want to bring to.
Thank you. Walter.
So I've had to gradually work with increasing budgets. So I started, again, with the Young Journalists Task Force, where we had $0, no money, but we still had to put on events and things like that, and I had to ask for money. And then I stepped into my role as vice president of the Greater Cincinnati chapter, where we had thousands of dollars in our budget, and we need to make sure that we are increasing money in the budget and making the right decision. I don't mind, again, like I said, I've invested investigative reporter background. I don't mind being a good idea. Maybe we shouldn't be spending money, but I've also had to examine a lot of budgets. Again, as an investigative reporter, I've had to look at school district budgets. I've had to look at city budgets. I've had to chase politicians down hallways and say, superintendent, was it really smart to sit in first class to go to Australia? So I've been able to look at budgets and follow the money, look at data and spreadsheets and say, and hold people accountable and say, are you really being transparent with the money? To look at receipts and make sure that they're adding up. And so I believe that's what qualifies me to be able to look at a budget like an NABJ's.
Great, thank you. And speaking of working with budgets and making those decisions, a big part of that will be working with fellow board members. So if elected treasurer and having to make the money decisions, how will you work with the president or other people who might disagree on where funds should be allocated? Walter.
I believe that when you're in this role as a treasurer, you really have to take the emotions out of the job, and you have to look at the facts, and you have to look at the numbers, and you have to be able to go to the board and say, okay, this is where we spent this money. Why did we do that? This should never happen again. I don't mind being the one that's asking the tough questions. That's something that I do, every day in my job, whether it's questioning the mayor of Cincinnati about his childhood poverty project and where's the money going. So I can be the person, I believe, that says, that's holding people accountable and making sure that we're being transparent. And that's something that I expect to do from day one, if elected to this position, saying that this is my role and this is what I plan to do. There are no hard feelings in this. I have to ask this question, and I have to make sure that we're doing the right thing, because not only is NABJ's name on the line, but my name is on the line as well.
Thank you. Ernest.
I think that people know that I'm not afraid to ask the tough questions. I think I'm someone who has a reputation of really speaking truth to power and also being an independent thinker. And I think the role of the treasurer is to really separate the politics and separate the personal relationships when making decisions that are about making fiscally smart decisions. I've made those tough decisions when I served on the board of the Philadelphia Association of Black Journalists. We look at relationships and people who want certain things, and you have to be able to stand your ground. And I think that on this position with the board members that we currently have, I think that, they know that, I'm not someone that's going to be a pushover. And I think that that's one of the most important things that matters when you're in a treasurer role, because you're not thinking about being liked or being popular. You're thinking about what's right for the organization. And sometimes the right decision is not always the most popular decision, but it might be the necessary decision. So I'm about making necessary decisions. And I just also want to add too that my experience with finances is not just observing budgets through other politicians, but actually actively looking at those budgets when they hit my table. And so I think there's one thing to look at other people's budgets in City Hall, like I have as a reporter, but it's another thing to actually have those budgets in front of you and making those decisions on a board or an organization. It's very different.
Thank you. And everyone is asking great questions. I just want to make sure that people are throwing their questions in the Q&A chat so that I'm seeing it. So the Q&A box, not the chat. So we can keep asking you great questions. And for both of you, younger journalists obviously make up a large percentage of NABJ members, and it's their first taste of NABJ. Usually it's a conference. So just given some of the tough decisions that have to be made, how would you say you keep the organization affordable for young journalists, either to go to the convention or interact with NABJ in other ways? And Ernest, let's start with you.
I think that how we engage with younger members and folks that may not be able to go to a convention is very simple. I think really it's about hitting them where they're at home, touching them where they're at home, looking at their chapters and looking at what's there for them. I think we need to stop centering the convention as the only way that we can engage members. We've known for years that there's been countless people that cannot travel always to conventions. And so we have to really change that Disney World mentality of this is the happiest place on earth and everything else is hell. We really have to think about creating these experiences in chapters and really empowering chapters to do it. I have a membership of over 200 members of the Philadelphia Association of Black Journalists. They love our chapter. If we go to national convention, they would still be fortified. They would still feel empowered. And I think on a national and ABJ level, more board members need to have more opportunities to connect with these members in different ways, whether it's visiting their boards, going to their group meetings, but also coming to their chapter events, their galas and other events that they have year round. We need to expand that outreach more, because I don't think everything should predicate on the national convention, especially if we're planning to reprioritize our budgeting goals in next coming years regardless. So I would say that.
Thank you. Walter?
I think we need to continue to make sure that we're meeting our younger journalists where they are. Again, looking at the Young Journalists Task Force and Millennial Media Summit, I've met a lot of young journalists who say, I really want to go to national convention, but I just can't afford it. So, I decided to come to the summit and see what this is all about. And I love it. I'm going to figure out a way. I do think that we need to, lean on some more of our partners and ask them to sponsor some of our younger members. And we also need to lean on our older members to say, think about yourself when you were in Elmira, New York, making $20,000 a year and you wanted to get to convention. Do you mind donating $50 so that way we can get some of these younger members to our convention? I also think that we need to give them some opportunities. Like I know that there's the opportunity where if you work a day of the convention, then you get an access to a day being on the convention floor at the job fair. We need to be having more events like that and more opportunities like that to allow our younger journalists to be able to go to the convention.
Great, thank you. Next question for you both. Transparency has been a word that you've both used tonight. So when it comes to financial obligations, expenditures, just working with the organization's money, how transparent do you plan to be with the board, but also with the entire membership of NABJ when it comes to the financial oversight of the organization? Walter, let us begin with you.
I believe that, making sure that at every single board meeting that we have, every business meeting that we have, the treasurer has a report. We also need to be putting the treasurer's report on our website for our members to access. Just even in doing research for this role, looking up our budget, and looking up our annual report, the latest annual report that I could find on the website was 2017, but I had to go to GuideStar to look up for our 2018 IRS reports. So I do think that we need to make sure that we're putting those online and that our members have access to it, so that way we are being transparent. They know where their money is being spent.
Great. Thank you, Ernest.
Absolutely. I agree with the points made by Walter, but I also think we need to be transparent about our own individual roles. I'm running for NABJ treasurer independently. I'm not currently as a candidate receiving any type of financial incentives for the organization. I'm not working double duties and jobs. And I made that decision because I did not think that it's ethical to be able to run as a candidate and also receive stipends from the organization while working. My opponent disagrees with me on that. And I think that when we talk about financial transparency, not one time did he mention in this forum that he is currently the NABJ programming co-chair. And I think that if you're going to receive money from the organization as of right now, while also running as a candidate, that should be disclosed in your bio. You should tell people that information up front so they can make those decisions and think about that. I think, right now, if I was in his position, I wouldn't accept any money. And I also probably wouldn't want to be in a position where I would have to disclose something like that while being a candidate. Previous candidates have had to make the decision not to do that, and I would not do the same. So I would say that if I was running and continue to be on the board, I would be very clear to membership that I would not be trying to get any type of financial incentives from the organization, my hotel and travel. And if that was the case, I would disclose that to members as well. But I don't mind paying my way in my term if I'm elected treasurer. I'll pay for my own hotel. I'll pay for my own travel. I think that when you're serving, you got to serve.
Can I have a rebuttal, please?
Yeah, you have a 1-minute rebuttal.
So I have paid my way for the past 10 years. I'm going to continue to pay my way as well. My travel is not being paid for because our convention is going to be virtual this year. So I'm walking from my bedroom to this office to attend the convention. I'd also like to point out that the Elections Committee agreed with me that I should continue to serve in my role as the programming co-chair, and then the board of directors also agreed with me. And I'd also like to point out that I did mention that I am programming co-chair this year. I said it in my intro. It's on my Twitter page. It's on all my campaign literature as well.
The National Organization Elections Committee had to ask you to do that. And that's stated on the NABJ website. So they had to ask you to do that, which then allowed you to do it. But that's fine.
No, it's been there before. Actually, it's been on my Twitter. It's been on my Twitter feed. It's been everywhere. Everyone knows that. I made an announcement. So
I will get to the part where you all can say your social media info. But I think this question is relevant after this exact conversation. So you guys are both running for the same position. One person will win, but you guys have both been in the organization for some time. So if you're not elected to an NABJ treasurer position, how do you plan to continue to serve at a national level, not necessarily formally, but to continue to help the organization at a national level? Walter, can you give us your answer?
I plan on continuing being the person that I am as NABJ. This is my first time that I've run for a board position. I've never run for a board position before. I would love this position, but if I don't get elected, I'm going to continue to be an advocate for NABJ. I'm going to continue to be a mentor. I'm always telling people you got to get active in NABJ, and you have to, make sure that you're attending our events and that you're going going to our convention, going to our regional events as well. I think my time with the Young Journalists Task Force is coming to an end because I'm aging out. I don't like to say I'm, not young anymore, but we do need to find some other leadership. But I continue to be a big supporter of NABJ. I love NABJ. I don't know where I would be without this organization. Every job that I've gotten is through some type of connection at NABJ. Even my first job, I met someone at the FAMU short course and he was able to get me my first interview and I got the job and I've just been rising since then. So I plan on continuing to be in NABJ, whether I win or lose this election.
Thank you. Ernest?
Well, no one has to question where I'm going to go. I've ran before for the NABJ board, and I've stayed active and stayed robust and stayed committed to the organization. I'm going to definitely continue to be a mentor to so many different members of the organization, especially those who are LGBTQ, millennials, freelancers, who want to see people like me represented on this board and represent this organization. what's very important to me is that oftentimes we talk a good game about inclusion and diversity within our organization. But when we look at the board representation right now, it doesn't reflect the membership by and large. And so I think regardless of whatever, happens in this outcome, I'm going to still represent and hold it down for so many people who don't feel represented in this organization. And I'm going to continue to serve and hold people accountable.
Thank you. We are winding down, but I have a few more questions for you both. So we started this conversation talking about the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on the organization, on its members, on every facet of our lives. So when talking about sponsors and reaching out to think about partnerships, how will you all approach people or try to convince them that NABJ is still worthwhile to team up with, even if everyone's reconsidering their budgets and where they're putting money right now? Walter?
I think, going to our sponsors and telling them that, you don't have to give as much money as you did before. We understand that, times are tough right now, but even with, our virtual convention and even with, monetizing some of these webinars, our ask isn't going to be as big as it is, but you still will be able to access our members. We'll still be able to have, good programming. Even here in Greater Cincinnati, where we had a Zoom meeting for our journal body, we had like 26 members show up. And that was really awesome, because people are tuning in, people want to be involved. Sometimes they physically can't get there, but if we're going to our sponsors and saying, hey, look at this great virtual program that we're having, our ask isn't as big as, we would have for a national convention. I think that's one way of convincing them and saying that our members are still working. Our members are still looking for jobs. They're still out there in the community. So this is still a worthwhile investment for your company.
Thank you. Ernest?
I don't think there's much to really oversell. I think at the end of the day, these newsrooms continue not to reflect this country. We continue to see terrible numbers of representation of Black journalists. And as long as there is an inequity in this country, especially in our newsrooms, we will forever need to have an NABJ, and we will forever have to make the case to sponsors that if they're about diversity and inclusion in America's media, then this is the organization that's been leading that charge for over 40 years. And I believe that the case is made, and the case can continue to be made, and we need to look at newer groups that is emerging and getting funds in different organizations regionally that's doing that. And we need to continue to make the case and remind people of how important this organization is and what its value is. The value is in our membership, the value is in our mission. We don't really have to oversell ourselves. I think that our existence holds so much weight and value that we just need to continue to spread that gospel to various organizations that we haven't touched, to explain to them why now, even more than ever, the mission is even more relevant and crucial.
Thank you. And last question, this comes from a very special audience member, Allison Davis. So NABJ celebrates its 45th year this December, and then that means in 5 years, NABJ will turn 50 years old. How do you think the organization should commemorate these milestones? Walter.
I believe that we should make sure that we are honoring our founders like Allison Davis, that we are, reminding people of the reason that we are founded, wherever our convention will be held, that held for 45 and for 50. Just last week, I bought our NABJ history book, making sure that I'm reading up on our history, knowing again why we were founded, our purpose and our existence. I think that just reminding people of why NABJ is here, and just showing that we are committed to our mission and that we're going to continue to be here, and that the next 50 years will be better than the last 50 years.
Thank you. Ernest.
I think the symbolism is incredible. I think that I would have loved it to be in Philadelphia. We are the founding chapter. But sometimes, we'll see what happens. But I think one of the most important things to me is the best way that we can celebrate it is to be our strongest we can be. I want us to hit our highest financial gains. I think that scoring the highest money raised for the organization is history. It should be what we're striving for. And as treasurer, I want to help get the organization to continue to go in the track where we're staying in the black, but we get black as we can be when it comes to our finances. I think the health of this organization and celebrating our organization's 50th anniversary is to be in its best shape it's ever been. And I think being on this board, I want to help to get it there like I've done for PABJ.
Great. Thank you both. Thank you all for the questions. So now as we are winding down on this debate, I want to make sure that each candidate has 2 minutes to do a closing statement. So since we began with Walter, let us start with Ernest on the closing statement.
Thank you again, NABJ. It's been great talking to you all tonight. I hope you all are being safe during COVID-19. I have some enchiladas in the kitchen that's getting ready to get cooked, so I'm a little hungry. But I want to say before wrapping up that you all have, two options. We can either maintain the status quo that we have, been familiar with, or we can try something that is smart, relevant, and necessary. And my campaign and the platform that I am speaking about is something that's really going to be relevant based on experience leadership. I have the experience necessary as an entrepreneur, as a hustler, as a freelancer, as a journalist that is compassionate, and also someone who can speak truth to power, but well measured, and someone who knows what it takes to really get this organization's finances to go to infinity and beyond. I'm running a race that is of my own, independent. I'm looking forward to talking to various chapters. Some of you all can reach out to me, you know where to find me. But I'm really about trying to get this organization to go a different direction. And I've been in leadership positions where I've shown financial growth. I have the relevant experience. I'm not in proximity to budgets. I'm actually creating budgets. I'm actually creating and developing and fundraising. And I think the difference between me and my opponent is simple. He is someone who's adjacent to the issues, and I'm somebody who's had to take them on head on. So if you want a leader, someone that's going to address these issues directly, someone who's actually have a proven track record of raising thousands of dollars, and the receipts can be found on Google, then elect me. And if you're interested in the status quo, let's see what happens.
Walter?
Yeah, NABJ, I'm running for this position because I love this organization. I've been, again, a member for the past 10 years. And if you want to know what type of person I am, you want to know about my track record, just look at my involvement in this organization, whether it be president of the CUNY, grad school chapter when I was in graduate school getting my master's degree, and looking at, some of the programming that we're putting on for a national convention this year. I've never run for a board position before, but I really have to think about, what position do I want to be in? And I want to be the treasurer because I want to make sure that our financial future is secure. Just 5-6 years ago, NABJ, we were not running surpluses. We were in the red. We had articles written about our organization saying that NABJ may not exist anymore. And it was embarrassing. I had people who know that I go to convention every year, know my involvement, send it to me and say, what's going on with this organization? And that should never happen again. And I believe that I'm the right person to make sure that it doesn't happen again. Again, I have an investigative background. I'm, used to asking the tough questions. I'm used to, looking at budgets. And yes, I've managed budgets too, as well. I've actually managed budgets, small budgets, and I've been able to put on events and make something out of nothing. I'm the type of person, if you ask about me, you ask around, I just make it happen. And so I believe that I'm the best person for the job. And again, I'm running for this position because I just really love this organization. And I want to make sure that the people coming behind me, the people that are coming after us, will see it in NABJ, and that we will be able to have the same great programming that we've had for ourselves.
Great. And how can people find both of you all on social media, since we are now living in a virtual world? Walter, throw out your social media.
Okay, my social media, I'm Walter Reports on all platforms. Walter Reports on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. You can friend me on Facebook at Walter Smith-Randolph. I have the campaign page, which is Walter for NABJ Treasurer. And you know what? I'm going to give you my phone number, 917-846-9248. If you have any questions, or any concerns, feel free to text me. Feel free to slide in my DMs. I'm an open book. I'm ready, willing, and able to, answer questions for any of our NABJ members.
Ernest?
Great. So I'm also on social media as well, verified on Twitter and Facebook. Twitter is at Mr. Ernest Owens. Same as on Facebook, just Ernest Owens. And also I have a campaign page, it's Ernest for NABJ on Twitter and Ernest Owens for NABJ Treasurer on Facebook. I'm open as well. It's not too hard to find me. And I'm definitely willing to provide the receipts and information about anything relating to this campaign and why you should elect me for your next treasurer.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much for taking time to answer the questions and for running for this important position. And before everyone jumps off to eat their various dinners, like Ernest will, here are some important dates to keep in mind. So we will continue to have these virtual forums. So the next one will be Thursday, May 21st. That will be for candidates for the academic representative. The following Thursday, May 28th, will be the forum with the unopposed candidates for parliamentarian and region 4 director. June 11th, there's going to be a second forum with the treasurer candidates that you guys saw tonight. June 25th, second forum with the candidates for academic representative. July 6th, that is when you have to have your membership to be able to vote in this election. July 13th through August 7th, which brings us right up to the virtual conference. That is when you can vote. And then the winners for all the elections will be announced the evening of August 7th. And thank you all for joining us. Have a great evening.
Thank you.